Hi guys, and welcome to Dee's Media World. I'm using my webcam camera today, so that usually means that my video will be a little longer. Hopefully you guys can see me okay, but it's not really so much about seeing me as it is listening. Today's video is going to be about minorities in Netflix shows. So within the last, I guess, year or 2 years, for a little while, Netflix has made a variety of shows they produce themselves. Like they've had successful, famous people come and make shows for them on Netflix, and you can binge watch the entire season on Netflix. So some of those shows are like House of Cards, Orange is the New Black was probably the biggest success. Like that's really what people found out about Netflix, and they probably even get their subscription to watch it. And some of the shows I'm going to talk about today, which are Master of None, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, and this show called Love that just aired on Netflix like this weekend. And I want to talk about this because I know there's a pattern, or either a pattern or just a problem that I've seen in these variety of shows that deal with minorities. Like we like to say in 2016, or some people would like to say, there's diversity in television, and racism isn't as prevalent. But when you watch some of these shows on Netflix, it's like there's either a pattern there, and it's sometimes subtle. I think a non-minority wouldn't really notice it, but a minority might. And I wanted to point out some of them in the shows that I watched, and I just watched another one that just came on. But I'm going to start with Master of None, which is probably one of the better shows on Netflix I've watched. Master of None is a show by Aziz Azara. I think that's how you say his name. He's this Indian comedian. He's been around for a while, but I've never listened to his stand-up or anything. He's actually one of the few minorities to have their own show on Netflix. Most of the other shows on Netflix are produced and written by white people or whatever. So he produced, wrote the show, whatever. He's the main character. And I think the main character's name is Dev. And he actually is one of the few shows I've seen on Netflix that does have minorities in it. There's this huge glare on here. He does have minorities on his show. Obviously, he's a minority himself. His parents moved from India, came to the States, and came to New York, and he grew up in New York as the character. And it deals with different issues per episode. He's like 30, I think, 30 years old. So we kind of see some of his problems, mostly with relationships, but there are a couple of good episodes, really good episodes. One that deals with kids. I think that's the first episode, deals with like his feelings about children and kids. And it's a kind of like a sitcom kind of show. I can't really describe it too well. I guess it's kind of like a sitcom relatable sort of show that has some jokes in it and stuff. And the first episode deals with kids, but there's a really great episode, I believe it's episode 2 or 3, that deals with parents and his relationship to his parents after they migrated from India to the United States, and his feeling on, and we kind of learn about, it's really good. You just got to watch it for yourself. I can't really describe it too well. Um, and most of the episodes are really about his relationships. His friends, or his network of friends, are mostly minorities. He has one friend, he's Indian. He has one friend who's, I think, Chinese. He has a black female friend who's lesbian, and he has a white friend. And that's fine. That has some diversity. But I couldn't help but notice that his main girlfriend, the girl who becomes his girlfriend, and the main lead girlfriend is a white girl. And the reason this originally and still does bug me in in Netflix is that this show is written by this Indian man who has minority friends, but even in a fictional show where he's the lead producer and he probably was responsible for some of the casting and had an idea of what he wanted his characters to look like, even in a fictional show, he doesn't have a minority woman. He doesn't have his love interest is still a white girl. And the thing is, as a black person, it didn't bug me that his lead wasn't black. It bugged me that his lead actually wasn't the very least, an Indian woman. And the reason that bothered me was because he's an Indian actor and he should know more than anyone else. And heck, there's an entire episode about this, how a lot of shows will, because he's actually like an actor or something, in the show, uh, Let's just talk about how like a lot of shows will only have like two minorities max or one minority max. That's like the fifth or sixth episodes or so. You can check the when you're on Netflix, check and see. Um, and he acknowledges that most shows don't put minorities really in there. And while that's true, I couldn't help but notice, yeah, that's the case in real life. But even on your own show, you don't date your own kind. You don't date. There are no Indian women. The only Indian woman is like his mom. His mom character. The character who plays his mom. And it's like even in your own show, you don't have an Indian lead. It's still a white girl. Like I mentioned this in my interracial dating video that there's this kind of this obsession with we can have, if we have a minority in something, he or she still has to date a white person. Like white people still have to be involved somehow. And I was like, it's still prevalent even in the mindset. And he may not realize that. And there are other characters. He has like one date with an Asian girl in one episode and stuff, but he still is dating white people, and that's kind of what I was thinking about watching the show. As much and as enjoyable as it was, it's like, yeah, you couldn't take it that one step further, could you? Like you could have a black friend and an Asian friend, but you would never date an Asian girl or have an Indian girl. And the other reason it bothered me was because even from a financial standpoint or from a cultural standpoint, this really could have boosted the Indian girls. Like if he picked an Indian girl to play his girlfriend, it really could have boosted her career. Like if he thought about it like that, like hey, because like we sometimes minorities we like to think we have this mindset that we would help another minority out. Like hey, us black women stick together or whatever, us black people stick together or whatever. And the same could be said for other minorities, but it's like even in that even in that way he wasn't thinking that way, like oh, you know what, I should have an Indian girl as my girlfriend because there aren't a lot of Indian people on TV, therefore there could be more of us on TV and stuff. And it's like even then he sort of misses that opportunity, and I don't even think he realizes that, because I read an article where his response to like the diversity on the show was like, hey, I have different types of friends on the show or whatever, and I date white girls in real life, so I guess I would date them in the show, which obviously went over his head completely, and I thought that was kind of interesting in this show, like, the white girl is still the lead. Another show I'm talking about with minorities and television on Netflix is Daredevil, which came out like early last year. And I think it's a good show too. I like both those shows, but all the shows I'm kind of talking about, it's like I enjoy them, but at the back of my head, it's like, yeah, the show still has issues. Like, as a black person or a minority, it's like, oh, everything's just not okay. Like, if it's like 90% good, but then that 10% of it's like, oh, you couldn't have done that. But with Daredevil's a little more subtle with how race is kind of dealt with on that show in comparison to some other shows I've seen. Like on Daredevil, um, the his girlfriend, who's not really his girlfriend, Rosario Dawson, is a minority, and she's kind of like his love interest. But she literally is only kind of there. She's there very scarcely. She's there every once in a while. She's only kind of there to heal his wounds and help him. She's actually an interesting character, and she has her own life. We just don't know much about it. We don't really see her outside of his space. She literally he meets her by like he's thrown into a dumpster. Spoilers. This is like episode 2 or 3 or something. Thrown into a dumpster. She saves his life, and then they continue to have sort of a banter and get to know each other a little bit. And she falls in love with him, but nothing happens beyond that. Even though like I think he likes her too, but he sort of pushes her off. They don't really have a romance, and she's gone for like solid 4 or 5 episodes. And then when she does come back, it's only to help him. It's only to he got hurt again, and she helps him with his injuries. And even though she's an interesting character on her own, we don't actually see her again. Like she's not. We don't know what she does when she's not there. Like Rosario Dawson is a good enough actress to do this role well, but it's like yeah, like even here, she doesn't really get much going on. Another minority on the show is Ben, who's played. Is a black man. He's like the journalist of the town or whatever. His death was one of the most infuriating deaths I've ever seen on TV because, long story short, he's a black guy. He's older black man who he wants he's the truth teller. He wants to find out the story. He's not afraid of what's the name of the guy? Fisk or whatever. He's not afraid of them. And he works with this girl named Karen, who is Daredevil's assistant. Not She doesn't know he's Daredevil, but anyway, works with her assistant. I'm just summing up, and she tricks him into going to see Fisk's mother at a nursing home. His wife is actually dying. Ben's wife is dying, and he actually can't focus on the story that's going on with Fisk and stuff right now because he needs to focus on what's going on with his wife. His wife is in the hospital, sick and dying, and but Karen tricks him into going with her to see um, Fisk's mother, and that trickery actually leads to his death later on. So he basically died because of her carelessness and her lying and her foolishness. And at the end, which that's infuriating enough. Like he basically, if he was gonna die, I understood it, but the way that it was written, it was kind of like, really, like she ruined you. Karen ruins you. She ruined your life. Literally, she gets you killed, and because Fisk literally strangles him to death. And at the funeral, his Ben's wife gets out of her hospital bed and is there, and Karen kind of tells her like, "I feel like I'm responsible for his death or whatever." And the wife is like, "Oh no, don't worry about it or whatever." Obviously, she doesn't know the full story, but either way, it was their way of telling us, the audience, to say, "Oh, it's not really Karen's fault. Like she didn't actually literally have a hand in his death." And I feel like because he's a minority character, and I think in the comic books he's white, but because he's a minority character and there's not a lot of those on the show, they kind of brushed it off like, oh, well, it's okay. It'll be fine. The black woman would, persevere, persevere without her husband. Even though she's dying from an illness and she just lost her husband, she's still smiling and she'll get through because he wanted it that way. He was okay with her dying. He was okay dying doing what he loved. I don't think he was okay dying like that. I don't think he was okay dying for something he didn't actually do. He died because Karen tricked him into going because she tricked him by saying like, "Oh, this is something for your wife. Like you're trying to find a new retirement home or something for your wife or something like that. Come with me. I know this place." And he's like, "Oh, okay." He's thinking it's about his wife. He gets tricked into going. She's lied to him, and that leads to his death. And I don't think he would have been okay with that in real life. I would have been okay with Ben dying that way if they didn't brush it off. If they didn't kind of brush it off like, oh, Karen's innocent after all. Like the wife forgives her for whatever. She doesn't even know the full story, but she forgives Karen and it's like, oh, this is okay and this is what he wants. I'm like, no wife in real life is gonna be happy at her husband's funeral, no matter what she believes in. She's not gonna be happy about her husband's funeral, telling someone it's gonna be like, oh, reassuring her like, oh, this is what he wanted, basically, like to be strangled to death. No, no, I don't buy that for a moment. I don't buy it for a moment. And that's another example of how minorities are treated in these kind of black shows, in these shows, not black shows, these shows. Um, Another example, I just watched this show called Love by what's his name? Judd Apatow is his name. He's done like Knocked Up, and he's done those raunchy comedies that aren't that good, but still he still gets money from studios to make more stuff. And he made a show called Love, and I just finished watching it. It's about 10 episodes, 30 minutes each, and I might do a review on that show after this, um, over the about the actual show itself. But how minorities in that show, there are two things. Unlike these other two shows I just talked about, Master of None and Daredevil, there are very few minorities in the show, and none of them are main characters. They are literally side characters, which I doesn't bother me too much because I kind of assume certain white people in the show kind of has like really nerdy, like one of the main characters is a really nerdy, dorky guy, and the other girl is just she's kind of a loser, to be honest. And I'll talk about that later. Um, there's a couple minorities scattered in there. I don't think those type of people really necessarily have friends who are minorities, but there are three people. There are three black people really in the show that there's no positive black person in the show. Like each black person I saw in the show is literally like a different bad joke, a bad cliched like racist joke. Like for example, there's one black woman in the show, and our main character Gus, he works at a TV station or TV, what's it called? Like a TV set. He's a tutor at a TV set. He tutors the young girl who's like 12 years old, actress, whatever. Doesn't matter right now. Um, and he works for her. She's her boss. The black woman's her boss. I swear I've seen this actor somewhere before. Can't place where I've seen her at the moment. But this black woman plays his boss, and all she really is this just angry, kind of bitter, mean kind of black woman. And sometimes it's justified. Like when she tells them off later on in the show, it's totally deserving. But I feel like they didn't give her any dimension at all. And it's like, okay, we have two main characters that we're supposed to see. We see other sides to them, like they're messed up, but they persevere. But this like black woman character, all she is kind of the borderline stereotypical black woman character. Like she's in charge and she's mean and she curses. She doesn't care about anybody. Like I, that kind of bugged me. But I didn't take it too personal until I saw two other characters in the show. There's another character, a black guy who actually works on the set, and he's the nephew of the black woman. And all he literally does, he is literally just the magical mystical Negro trope, which I've heard years ago. And that trope means the black person, usually a black dude, the black person who sort of just gives the white people advice. Like he doesn't really have his own life. He doesn't really have his own story or characteristics. He's just there sort of just to give the white people advice. And why do I know this? Because that's all he does when he is on screen. He literally says this too. He says this in one of the episodes, probably like episode 7 or so. He's joking with our main white lead, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm kind of like I'm the mystical." I don't know if he says the exact words, but he's literally telling him like, "Yeah, I'm the black guy who listens to the white people's problems and helps them solve their problems and gives them good advice. I reassure you that you're awesome." And he literally says this, and I think that was supposed to be some kind of joke. And I had figured this out already that he was this kind of character, but it was so odd to watch a show where the guy literally says, the black guy is like, yeah, that's literally my purpose here. Like, I could be good at that, just giving white people advice. And another, and then the third, which that was bad. The worst one was that there's a scene where our two leads go to, they're dating, they go to what's it called, like a magic house, magic mansion. Never really heard of that kind of thing. Doesn't really matter. They're looking at magic and they see this woman. And it's a bigger, heavier set, darker skinned black woman. And she's looking at magic and stuff. And all her reactions are like, oh, and oh. And it just reminded me, just the way that she's reacting reminded me so much of how they would make fun of slaves and how they would not understand something. And I don't think it was supposed to be that deep, but I couldn't help but feel that way since they're literally three random, not really black characters in the show. And that's kind of what projected me to make this video today, because I have just been noticing this pattern of like how black characters in these Netflix shows just don't get any respect. Like they get no respect. They're not really treated like, some shows sugarcoat it, but they're not really treated like human beings in real life like white characters are. And another show, Jessica Jones, that I only got, I can't fully talk about it because I only watched about half of it. Uh, that's the same thing with black characters too, just in a different way. Like we have a woman, Jessica Jones, she's an example of, I know that we in television watch a lot of characters who are unlikable but supposed to be our hero. Like I guess they call it the anti-hero or whatever. But Jessica Jones is an example of someone who's too unlikable for my taste. And I know like other people were talking about this as well in commentary with Jessica Jones, is that long story short, um she's been involved with this guy named Kilgrave who he possesses, and he's able to control people literally. Like he can control their actions, everything. And Jessica gets involved with him, and the flashback, we find out this a couple episodes in, whatever. She actually, he tells her to hurt this woman, this black woman, and she doesn't do it, or she doesn't want to do it. But of course, she has no mind of her own. She kills this woman. She punches her so hard, the woman's heart stops, or something like that. Like she kills the woman in kind of a brutal way, like in a creative, you don't really see that kind of way, not a conventional way. Like she punches her girl so hard that her heart stops, and it's a black woman, and that kind of awakens Jessica, and she sort of all these bad things that Kilgrave was having to make her do. She kind of breaks from his control and runs away. And some people are saying like, well, isn't it messed up that Jessica sort of gets her freedom from hurting a black woman or literally killing a black woman? And I had to agree with that, and also the fact that the black woman's husband, who's his name escapes my mind right now, the character, he's one of the main characters in the show. He's this black guy. They kind of they don't kind of they do sexualize his body and his image, and he's like this darker skinned, really built, tall, really attractive black man. And Jessica does whatever she can to get into his pants. Like she knows she killed his wife, yet she doesn't she doesn't allow that to stop her from sleeping with him multiple times while she knows this information. And she even continuing on, she's using him for his body, and it's just kind of gross to watch. Like around that time, I did watch up until he finds out the truth, but I was just like, this is disgusting. Like this girl is literally taking advantage of him, knowing, taking advantage of not taking advantage of him sexually, but she's using him. She knows. How can I put it this way? She knows she did him wrong. She knows she killed his wife, but she's so wanting that black guy, like all those white girls do. They want that black guy to sleep with. She wants him so bad that she won't even let the little bit of her conscience that she does have stop her from sleeping with him multiple times, like a couple of times. And it's gross. It's disgusting, really. It was like I was just like I can't feel sorry for this girl. Like anything that happens to Jessica after this point, it's like there's a difference between making a mistake and just like, because here's the thing, she's intentionally doing this. She's continuously sleeping with him. She knows who he is because she's a detective, basically. She stalks him. She has stalked him. She knows where he lives, where he works, and all that kind of stuff. She knows about things about him, but the only reason she doesn't stop herself, why she doesn't tell him the truth, is because she's so attracted to him. And that's another thing that was just gross to me. I couldn't even finish that show. But yes, it was kind of these shows are piling up as I watch them on Netflix, and I'm thinking, oh, these minorities and mostly black people, because it's usually black people. Not that all minorities are treated well on these shows, but these black characters on these TV shows, it's like they get treated so poorly. They get black people get represented so badly in these different like these different shows with black people in them, because Daredevil and Jessica Jones, they're comic book shows. Master of None is like a comedy, and so is Love. Like they're different type of those mean kind of art sarcastic comedies. And I just can't help but notice that like we don't like we like to say racism, like my closing point is we like to say that racism is gone and that we have diversity in shows, but just because there is a black person in a show doesn't mean they're still treated like a human, doesn't mean they're still treated with respect, doesn't mean that they're a real character. It's not enough just to be in something, is what I'm saying. Like it's not progress to have black people or minorities in the show if they just don't do anything that matters, if they don't have any impact and they don't have their own stories. That it just does nothing. It does nothing. It just looks like it does something. But that's kind of what I just wanted to talk about is Netflix and minorities. So I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Deuces.